Everyone, this is update for May 29, 2022, day 95 of the war, end of the date update. So we're going to discuss first, as we always do, strategic and general questions, and then we're going to do walks through the front line. In terms of strategic situation, both countries are getting more and more exhausted. So we mentioned on Friday that both Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin indicated willingness to have negotiations. So as a result, on Monday, Turkish President Erdogan is going to call both leaders basically to test the water for opportunity to organize negotiations between the two countries. So that's kind of like at the high level political situation. If we sort of compare what's going on the front line, essentially right now there is a stalemate. We've been discussing this Severodonetsk salient battle near Popasna, all that area, for probably past 2 weeks, and it has intensified past about 10 days, where the situation very dangerous for Ukrainian side, but it does look to us more and more that Ukrainian side managed to hold on and not to get encircled there, which gives extra sort of support, extra negotiating power for Ukrainian president negotiating with the Russian president. So this is overall situation, sort of at the high level political situation. In addition, Ukrainian is receiving, on a separate note, Ukraine is receiving more heavy weapons, and surprisingly, some of them are actually really great and actually exactly what is needed. So Ukraine has received 18 self-propelled howitzers called Crab from Poland. This is actually pretty good. One of the best weapons, alongside with German Panzerhaubitze 2000. So basically, what this weapon is about, it has. Let's just actually look at the sort of kind of like how it was designed. So Poland basically used a base from South Korean howitzer that was designed in 90s. Then essentially turret from AS-90 from the UK, and then the barrel was, I believe, designed by German Rheinmetall. So it's essentially the same barrel as, if we understand it correctly, as the barrel for Panzerhaubitze 2000. So they kind of like identical in a way, even though, Polish one is kind of assembled from from 3 sources essentially. But this, in general, in all of this self-propelled howitzer or any artillery piece, the most important part is the barrel. That's kind of like an engine in the car in terms of importance. And then the next sort of level, like if we drill down a little bit more, the next important thing is the length of the barrel. The longer the barrel, the better. I mean, to some extent, right? At a certain point, it's too long, then it becomes actually inefficient. The situation goes in the opposite direction. But they all kind of shorter than actually optimal in general. So from that perspective, in a simplified way, you could think the longer the better. So this crabs, they have a length of the barrel is measured in calibers, and the length is 52. Basically, just for the simplicity, just remember the bigger the number, the better. And so it has a 52 calibers length, and essentially Russia doesn't really have much to counter to it. It has its own new, or essentially very, very deeply modernized howitzer called 2C35, and it has lengths of 52 barrels as well. 52 lengths of the barrel, 52 calibers. It's unclear how many were manufactured, but most estimates show that there were 40 to 50 units made so far. They were basically accepted by Russian military between 2016 and 19, and the production started in about 2019. So they haven't they don't really have many of them manufactured. However, there is a huge, well, relatively big park of their older versions of this howitzer called 2C19, and then there is a 2C19 M2, which simply means that this is modernized version of 2C19. This is howitzer from self-propelled howitzer from the Soviet time. Was designed in late 70s, early 80s in the Soviet Union. The length of the barrel is only 47 calibers, which makes it in a counter battery fire. Crab will definitely destroy 2C19 or 2C19 M2, because the whole point of the length of the barrel, the longer the barrel, the longer it sends the projectile, right? So typically this, and then also there's a lot of variation depending on the shells. There are like simple shells that are sort of flying the shortest range. Then there are specially designed shells that are more like aerodynamically better. They have a smaller drag basically. And they fly a little bit longer. And then there's kind of like almost like a semi-rocket type of shells that essentially help essentially small rocket engine helps it to fly a little bit like even more longer. But those are already kind of like more sort of hybrid between the rockets and actual artillery shell. So it's in a way kind of, then you're probably better off just simply using regular rocket launchers. However, if you really compare more like true artillery shells, so then this crab, 52 caliber barrel shoots further versus N47, and there's also more precision. So basically, if they fight sort of face to face, the crab has highest probability of winning. The only problem, Ukraine has only 18, and as you can see, Russia has 40 to 50 of the comparable type of self-propelled howitzers. Obviously, not all of them are on Frontline, so probably Russia has comparable number, 20, 25 on the Frontline, maybe even less. We don't know for sure. But then it has a lot of, if you like, large stock, about more than 700 of sort of a little bit more inferior, but they're still pretty capable tools of the war. Then, in addition, Ukraine received some number of M109 self-propelled howitzer from the US. We don't even know version. Most likely we think the version is A6, but this is actually not confirmed. There are versions from A1 to A7. A1, A2, A3, really old stuff, and it's pretty much inferior to this Russian 2C19. And by the way, on another note, Ukraine also has about 35 to 40 2C19 not modernized versions. So it has some number of those as well from the Soviet Union, obviously. So we don't know how many of M109 Ukraine received, but they a little bit worse. As you can see, they have 39. The length of the barrel is only 39 calibers. And basically the way you can kind of think is that this is kind of like like M109 is grandfather. Then Soviet Union, in response to M109, developed this 2C19. Then was upgraded to C19 M2. Then in the next iteration, as response to C19, sort of the West and specifically more Germany developed their Panzerhaubitze 2000, which is Crab is kind of like long distant sort of family member basically, and essentially it's the same thing basically, just packaged in different sort of wrapping. And so as response to that, then Russian military developed this 2C35. So basically kind of like you probably now better understand how the whole kind of like family tree kind of was developing. And so this is definitely exactly type of weapons that Ukraine needs to for successful defense. It's obviously, as you can see, Russia has roughly 800. Ukraine is 18 of this, 35 of 2C19 that it had, and then some unknown number, which also we believe is probably 20, 30, 40. It's not huge numbers. So Russian military still, basically dwarfs Ukrainian in terms of its self-propelled howitzer capabilities. And we're speaking right now only about 155, and the Russian actually caliber is 152 millimeters. So we're speaking just about this kind of like this tier of the self-propelled howitzers, because what happened, it was the Soviet artillery. They also have 122 millimeter self-propelled howitzers, and Ukraine obviously has those. Russia has those. They obviously less potent in general, because the caliber is smaller, as you can imagine. So the projectile is smaller. The destructive capability is also smaller. But so that's another kind of chunk there where with the Russian side has advantage as well. And they both use old Soviet self-propelled 122 millimeter howitzers. So what is happening is definitely balance of power slightly, very, very slowly tilting towards Ukrainian side in terms of, okay, it now has this 18 crabs, it has M109, it has M777, even though they're stationary guns, but it still creates, it's obviously the stationary is always worse relative to self-propelled, but it's still better, right, overall. So the situation is slowly moving in Ukrainian direction, but very, very slowly, and you can see the magnitude of Russian advantage just in this category, just in 155 millimeter category. You can see it dwarfs Ukrainian situation. Ukraine will get 12 Panzer Haubitzer 2000, 5 from Netherlands and 7 from Germany. So that also will increase to like 30 most modern ones that essentially will definitely counter Russian situation with 2C35 for sure. So then Ukraine is essentially will be equal, and to extend better. There is some advantage to the Russian 2C35. It has more automation in terms of feeding the gun. Basically, auto loading mechanism there is better, or basically that allows faster rate of fire overall. And for that reason, actually, they have only 3 crew members as opposed to this ones, the Crab and PH2000. They have I think 5 crew members for that reason. So there is some advantage here. However, the shells, then these ones have advantage over the shells. We spoke about those aerodynamically shaped shells. We don't believe that Russia has those. So overall, this howitzers are probably more potent than 2C35, but it's not perfect sort of apples to apples comparison, basically. So this is a quick update on the situation in terms of artillery, and specifically self-propelled artillery. Let's now actually go to our front line, and let's look at what's going on around. We're actually gonna look again from the very north and gonna go in clockwise fashion. Just a quick mention, there are artillery ping pong continues here. It doesn't stop. So the situation is, doesn't change basically. Now let's actually look at the situation near Kharkiv. Here, more or less stable. Again, low intensity fighting for this Ternova. Some fighting around this area, but it's really squad type size fighting. Really we cannot even say it's a company size fighting. So it's essentially kind of like a stalemate basically here. Let's now go to Izyum bridgehead and Lyman bridgehead, see what's going on there. And so this is schematic picture. As we discussed, most of these troops in that colored in gray were transferred to area near Popasna to exploit Russian initial success. That was achieved actually by the Wagner group. And by the way, speaking of Wagner group, so now the situation getting there also more difficult. So they used to for basically to go and call it work in quotes work for Wagner group, you needed prior military experience. Basically, you need to serve in the army. Now they dropped that requirement. So as long as you were not convicted sort of felon, or you were not in jail and you have decent health, that's all you need at this point. So there is no more prior military experience requirement. So it's very clear that there is situation deteriorates there as well. We spoke before about Russian military dropping requirement for contract soldiers to 50 years old, and there are even conversation about like completely dropping even further. So, but for now, for sure, it's 50 is sort of kind of like the sort of barrier. But probably as the things will go sort of worse, that probably will go even lower. And we just for the sake of how difficult it is for Ukraine, even there are people that like 60-year-old, 65-year-old who fight. So this is very like the situation is for sure is no joke. Let's put this way. Let's actually look now at the Izyum bridgehead. Essentially, situation here more or less stalemate. The only place where Russian side is trying to kind of create opportunity for itself is attacking from this village Pasika that they captured probably about 20 days ago. So, but basically early May. So they trying to attack south, basically in the direction of the village called Bohorodechne. And the point of this attack is obviously generally kind of create opportunity to potentially force withdrawal of this group, but also force withdrawal of this small bridgehead that's remaining here that's held by Ukrainian troops, centered around a town called Svyatohirsk. And it's really tiny town, about 10,000 people or 12,000 people, really tiny. So they don't have enough resources to fully hammer here, but they still trying to kind of achieve something in this area. This is the only place where there is persistent Russian attacks at this point on this bridgehead. So the situation here is around Svyatohirsk is stable. Exactly for that reason, Russian troops are not trying to push here from the front because it's the hope is to attack and achieve something from basically kind of like a rear. Plus, it's probably more difficult to fight. It's all wooded area, and it's much harder to fight in a wooded area than sort of like on an open terrain. I mean, this here as well is not the best area. Basically, it's also kind of wooded, and there are ridges here, as you can see even from the map. But still, they trying to kind of sort of trying their luck here, because here it opens up opportunity not only to push this to force retreat from this bridgehead, but it also creates opportunity to attack here from the rear and force withdrawal from this. So kind of like you can then pick and choose which way you want to go from there if you're successful here. But so far there's no progress in this area. The other then let's move to this bigger Lyman bridgehead that's now obviously the tiniest and the smallest. So Ukrainian army is still holding around like small tiny bridgehead around this village Stary Caravan. It's being slowly but surely squeezed by Russian troops, but it's hard to kind of fight here. Again, it's well wooded terrain, so it's not super easy. And they're not trying to put too much pressure. Basically, the Russian side is also trying to conserve their resources and not to have too many casualties. So it's kind of like a slow motion kind of fight here. now let's actually look at the Severodonetsk salient. And as just kind of like to, for those who are new, just to explain big picture what was going on here for past, I guess, from months and a half. So the first Russian troops tried to, this is what we call Donbass salient, right? So this is Donbass salient. You see a lot of Ukrainian troops concentrated here. So the idea of Russian command was actually breaks through here from Izyum bridgehead and then breaks through from south, create basically two pincers from north and south, meet somewhere here and encircle all of these Ukrainian troops. And then if this encirclement is not possible, to at least force withdrawal of all of these Ukrainian troops towards west. And the point was that there, around this area here, there was very well engineered Ukrainian positions that are difficult to attack from the front, and those attacks lead to extremely high casualties. So if Ukrainian troops basically abandoned those positions and withdrew towards west, then it's going to be, again, it will be easier to dislodge them from the new positions because they wouldn't have good entrenched and very well engineered positions. So that was kind of thinking behind all of this. That attempt failed. So the Russian troops got stuck here on this Izyum bridgehead, and they were stopped by Ukrainian army. Ukrainian army paid very, very heavy price in terms of human lives. There were a lot of obviously dead soldiers, wounded soldiers trying to prevent Russian breakout here. Then Russian troops tried breakout here. They managed a little bit here, didn't quite succeed much, and they didn't, to be fair, they didn't have many forces here. At that time, they were also distracted by the siege of Mariupol. So they did not achieve any success. They realized that the probability of it is very extremely low. So then what they try to, like, okay, let's refocus. Let's just try to bite smaller piece and what we call Severodonetsk salient. So they decided to create smaller pocket, basically here, by tip of this bigger Donbass salient. So they attacked from the north. They attacked from the south near Popasna. The attack from the north failed and failed with significant, very large Russian casualties, both in human lives and probably more so in equipment. There were more than 100 units of equipment lost in attempt to create a bridgehead here from the north. So the Russian side abandoned it, and then they actually were pretty lucky and pretty successful due to new strategy, and they create significant, like kind of like a salient near Popasna here. And the way it was done is actually by transferring a significant portion of troops that were on the Izyum salient, on the Izyum bridgehead, to the Popasna area. That's how the success was kind of like exploited here. And let's actually look at this whole situation again. So this is the northern sort of shoulder of this Severodonetsk salient. It's quiet. This is this area of Bilohorivka where the Russian troops succeeded to creating bridgehead, and then it was successfully destroyed by Ukrainian troops with the help of artillery. Again, speaking about the importance of artillery in this war. So this is just a sign, just to explain what happened here. Then Russian troops are pressuring Ukrainian defenders here in Severodonetsk, and let's call it Severodonetsk bridgehead. They established some foothold in the town here from kind of like eastern and northeastern side. We're going to look at it in more detail. But the biggest sort of success they had by capturing Popasna initially, and then basically expanding this success in all of the directions. So first north, then west, and then this kind of like a northwestern direction. And finally, they were trying to push very, very hard in this northwestern direction to basically, create encirclement of all of these troops here. So far, that drive actually failed, and for past 2 days it was stalemate. And actually today Ukrainian troops did a small counterattack and pushed Russian troops a little bit further away from this road, which used to be the main logistical artery for Ukrainian troops in this area. At this point, it's no longer working. The logistics kind of like was redesigned, and basically it goes kind of north through this road, and then it goes, as you can see here. This is kind of like now main logistical artery for Ukrainian troops here. But anyways, they pushed Russian troops from here about like 1.5 kilometers and gain full control of a couple villages. We're gonna when we look at that in detail, I'll discuss in more detail. So this is really clearly means that this whole drive here is probably exhausted, and then tying it back to the political willingness of the Russian leader to have negotiations. It's probably why he's willing to do that, because basically at this point, and we mentioned this several videos before, that this is in a way kind of like last hurrah for Russian army in the current sort of phase of the war, right? So this is all they can do, and if they're not successful in encircling Ukrainian troops or driving them out, that's essentially it. They don't have more resources to continue active offensive operations at large scale, let's put this way, the way it used to be in Ukraine. So what they will need, they need at this point the only pass, well, actually two passes. The most hopefully likely pass is mobilization in Russia. The other pass, hopefully it's not going to happen, is using tactical nuclear weapons here. So hopefully that doesn't get there. But then for sort of internal political reasons, mobilization is going to be very bad move for Russian leadership. So it tries to avoid it as much as possible. And that's probably another reason why, putting declared willingness to negotiate, right? Our take that probability of successful negotiation is extremely low, given the position of both sides. But it just the sort of objective reality forces both sides to even at least try to negotiate. Even if the probability of success is extremely low, basically. So this is now. Let's actually look a little bit, and then let's actually look at the situation around Severodonetsk. So this is what we mentioned, that Russian troops managed to gain a little bit of area on their sort of northeastern part of town here. There's a kind of like bus station area, that's what it's called, and then there's a hotel called Mir here in this area. So that's what they captured essentially. There are also claims by the Russian sources that they also managed to capture this whole area. We don't have any support or evidence for that. So for now, we did not change sort of map, and we'll see it. We would see a lot of sort of evidence and sources probably will be all over the propaganda machine that if they were to capture this area, but anything is possible. But so far, for sure, they control this small area. Ukrainian, obviously, defenders don't have resources to push them out, and honestly, that's probably not what they need to do. The whole point is to defend the town and prevent Russians from using this resources elsewhere on other stretches of the front line. And as a reminder, so the problem for Ukrainian troops here is that Russian. So there were there were three bridges, but one is controlled by the Russian side. Basically, probably it's destroyed. Then the second one, the main one that was being used by Ukrainian side, was destroyed by the Russian artillery. And there is a last bridge that's left that's still controlled by Ukrainian side, but it's semi-destroyed, and you cannot. you cannot use it for heavy weapons. Basically, you cannot bring any heavy weapons inside of the town. But as we mentioned many times before, the urban fighting is really fighting of the light infantry. That's what's the best there in general. So Ukrainian side kind of has what it needs there, and basically the point of this group is to tie up resources of the Russian side so they cannot transfer them to continue exploiting situation here, basically. So now let's look actually at the situation. The most critical, most difficult situation for Ukrainian side was this situation in kind of like northwestern corner of this whole call it Popasna salient. So this was what we shown before in yesterday and a couple days before, where this was the most kind of like northern point of Russian success, where they managed to control. They were on outskirts of village Bilohorivka, and they controlled some portion of village Nagirne, basically. So this is there where they drove the most. So this is situation after small Ukrainian counterattack. So what happened is now a Ukrainian side firmly controls village Bilohorivka village, and then they managed to drive Russian troops out of Nagirne. So basically now this, in order for Russians to kind of drive further northwest, they really need to back again capture those two villages, kind of capture this railroad embankment and all of this area. So all it is just the saying that the sort of balance of power is definitely going in the direction of the stalemate. It's clearly not like anything major. Ukrainian troops are not able to push to drive Russian troops out of this area or do any major, offensive operation. But all it tells is that as soon as the Russian push has sort of subsided or weakened, Ukrainian troops managed to do small-size counter-offensive, which kind of all it is means it's just stalemate. That's where it's all going to. Beyond that, the Russian troops obviously trying to attack here, but here this area of the front line is very well sort of entrenched and engineered by Ukrainian troops. So this is kind of like the area of sort of suicidal frontal attacks. So Russian side is trying not to go sort of crazy here. The focus was more in this area. They're still trying to attack from Viktorivka towards Rubivka and towards Kamyshevaha, basically kind of like trying to capture this from the flank. But so far they were not successful. So situation overall here is at this point more or less stable. Obviously things can change. It's not like a Ukrainian army is in great position, great situation. This whole so-called success was achieved by huge number of human life losses. So it's in a way Pyrrhic victory for both sides in a way, this whole situation, and that's why again we mentioning that both sides are exhausted on both, and this looks like more and more like a stalemate situation basically. Let's look at the sort of bigger picture of this whole area. So this is this Popasna salient. Then Russian troops captured this whole area we mentioned before, thanks to Wagner group. But so far there's no more progress here because again there's no regular Russian enough of regular Russian troops to continue the push basically. There is small attempts to attack from the south, mostly basically driven by the First Army Corps, which we mentioned before. They're lower quality troops overall because they are essentially conscripts from their Ukrainian territory that's controlled by Russian sort of federation since 2014, and they get they basically getting worse equipment. Basically, from all angles, this are like second or third rated troops overall, but they still using them to kind of trying to, to achieve something here, understanding that most of the sort of capable Ukrainian troops are tied up there. So basically, they're testing Ukrainian defenses in that area. Now let's quickly look at the situation straight west of Donetsk, where it's essentially a stalemate, never-ending attempts of the Russian side to exploit situation here. Again, attacks from here, and the end goal is to basically capture this town of Avdiivka. Nothing changed here against heavy shelling around Marinka, Novomikhailivka. It's all kind of the same story. It's almost like a broken record here, essentially, all the time. So this is a little bit closer look at the whole situation. So far, no success in expanding this salient by Russian army, and here they don't even have any kind of success at all. So situation basically stalemate here. So now let's actually switch and look at Zaporizhia front line. We're going to be very short because, again, this is that initial wedge that Russian troops managed to build when they were trying to do the encirclement of the entire Donbass salient, but it was successfully plugged in by Ukrainian side by bringing here 128th Brigade and Azov Kiev Regiment. So situation been stable here for a long time. This is general look at this whole front line. Again, no changes here. Now let's actually look at the Kherson bridgehead, because situation there started to change, and we discussed that. This is what's been going on here. Ukrainian troops managed to cross the river at Davydiv Brid, and then they drove about 10 kilometers into Russian controlled territory, but they were stopped there. Let's actually look, I would like to the goal was to get to Nova Kakhovka here. Basically, the point is to cross actually not the bridge here, it's a dam here, and this is where I said I would like to correct myself, because I was probably extremely tired last night and did not say it correctly. Basically, it's a dam that holds all of this artificial lake here, and so hopefully it doesn't get blown up, basically, because if it gets blown up, it's a huge amount of water that will go down here south and probably will flood the city of Kherson, and probably will be 100,000 of dead people as a result of it. So hopefully nothing sort of bad happens here, but the goal is obviously to drive here and cross the river here, and basically create, as initial goal, create a bridgehead here and start and being able to start controlling this freshwater channel, as which we discussed is extremely important for Russian military and economy, and for feeding essentially with water Crimean Peninsula that is being controlled right now by the Russia. So this is extremely kind of like the goal is objective of this offensive is extremely important generally. And then essentially, if you're able to establish the bridgehead on this side, then you can drive south and essentially encircle all of these troops here. And what this really means that these troops will just simply, evacuate this bridgehead without even much fighting, because if there is a threat of encirclement, they will have to withdraw basically back to Crimean Peninsula essentially. So this is very, in a way, if it succeeds, very correct move in general in terms of strategically recapturing this bridgehead here and essentially creating credible threat of encirclement and potentially encircling Russian troops somewhere there. So, but let's actually look what's going on there. So the Ukrainian side had initial success. They crossed the bridge. They drove through Russian defenses here, Davydiv Brid. Then they managed to get to village Bruskynske and actually capture there, but then they were stopped there and they were not able to move any further. And the way they were stopped is by air by Russian air attacks and the artillery attacks as well. So there is essentially no Russian troops like infantry or basically like regular tank and infantry here. Basically, they were essentially stopped by artillery and Russian air attacks essentially here. So the Russian troops that were here, they withdrew, and they're essentially right now trying to create defensive position kind of like southwest of Bruskynske. There is another village here. I think it's called Kostromka, if I'm correct. So, but essentially this is, and then Ukrainian troops also crossed the river here, and they essentially established. They captured. There are a couple of villages here. They recaptured those villages, and so now they created bridgehead here. So this is creating essentially support for this kind of like for these forces in Bruskynske, so they not gonna get cut off. Because if you look initially, what the Russian side tried to do is they attacked at the flanks of this breakthrough, trying to cut it off and seal basically this and encircle these Ukrainian troops. Apparently, these troops here were just the screening troops, very small in number, small in force, so they were not able to cut off Ukrainian breakthrough here. So essentially, what it led that Ukrainian side established the bridgehead here, but it's not able to move further down, south. I think that's. But the point was to go through this road. Obviously, it's very sort of self-evident. The attack would go along this road. The first objective would be to capture this town called Berislav, and then kind of drive south and hopefully capture Novokakhovka, which is on the other side, on the eastern side of the river. And essentially the channel that we discussed is here. So that's the kind of like the whole plan, whole situation. So far, this attack stalled. And what we know is that Russian command is hastily bringing troops here to basically seal it up, patch it up. It remains to be seen. Basically, this is a kind of fight that's in progress, and we'll see where it all leads, basically. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye-bye.